Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. If you're divorcing your toaster, you have to ask, is it your toaster or are you just an a-hole?
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Seth Nelson. As always, I'm here with my good friend, Pete Wright. Today, we're taking a closer look at one of the key factors to play into the divorce scenario. One of the partners is an a-hole. Brian Ronalds is back, author behind How Not to Be an A-Hole series. He's back to share what it takes to look at yourself in figuring out what part of your issues in the marriage, the divorce, or post-divorce are a bad fit, and what parts are you being an a-hole. Brian, welcome back to the toaster.
I am more than happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Brian, last time you were here, it's great to see you, by the way. Last time you were here, you had a book. Now, I feel like it's been a while, but now you've got 6. What happened? Have you been doing anything else?
I have. I actually directed 2 movies in between all these, but it's just self-help therapy for myself to be sane, but also to help others not to fall into some of the traps that people fall in when we're talking about a specific book. Husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah, right. The last time you were here, it was How Not to Be an A-Hole Husband and Lose Your Wife. And you were talking about your own experience going through there. And now that we have the greater a-hole expanded literary universe. We've got How Not to Be an A-Hole Wife and Lose Your Husband, How Not to Be an A-Hole Boss and Lose Your Employees. We've got A-Hole Boyfriend and Girlfriend, and How Not to Be an A-Hole Employee and Lose Your Job. I'm really curious to get us started how you have your sort of inner exploration of, for lack of a better word, responsibility in a relationship has expanded your worldview, just in how you interact with the people in your lives to allow you to write these books.
For those who didn't tune into the first ones, first, shame on you. But second,
we always like to ridicule our listeners. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Start with a real shame-based premise.
Maybe the next book, Pete, is How Not to Be an A-Hole Guest.
A-hole guest.
A-hole host and lose your guest. A-hole guest and lose. That's perfect. Perfect.
No, gosh. If you can't take that hilariousness, then you probably shouldn't read my books. No, I'm just kidding. It all started. I was married for 17 years. I went through a crappy divorce. I learned a lot of things along the way, which I wanted to help, and wrote How Not to Be an A-Hole Husband and Lose Your Wife, a ridiculously 30-day guide. And it did really well. But I was getting some comments and some reviews as far as where's the wife version? After that first year, I wrote that one. So now the wife can come home with her book and his book and say, look, honey, look what I got for us to read together. And that's basically how it got started. And then once I started seeing the reactions, then I just spitballed writing how not to be this or that and lose your this or that. So I thought the next natural thing to do is, how not to be an a-hole girlfriend and lose your boyfriend, a ridiculously easy 30-day guide.
Well, and that's really, I think, where I'm most sort of interested, because I think these, the first book is so full of taking responsibility for your own actions, right? If you're being an a-hole, it's because you've lost some sense of perspective on how your actions and reactions interact with other people, how your behavior impacts other people, and to take ownership of that and try to see things through a different lens. And I totally get how the wife can be a pivot on that. I'm curious, your experience writing these other books, it feels like once you understand how not to be an a-hole husband, it might be easier not to be an a-hole anything. Is that your experience?
Yeah. I mean, if you're willing to look into yourself, it's pretty common knowledge. And I would say, psychologically speaking, a lot of the times we project our own inner insecurities onto others, and you're not aware of it. And this is just reminders of bringing awareness of how to be a good person. And yes, you can apply some of the stuff from the husband and wife books, but my goal is to have, for every book that I write, there's got to be 2 to offset the other one. So that's why I wrote How Not, or I'm writing How Not to Be an A-hole Employee and Lose Your Job, to pair with How Not to Be an A-hole Boss and Lose Your Employees, which I think one of my favorite books I've written so far.
I was just reading it last night, actually, and I think there's just so much good material in there. But to Pete's point, I think all of these things really do overlap, because at its core, you're evaluating yourself and in essence taking responsibility for the relationship. Now there's two in all of these relationships, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, employee, employer. But in essence, it's all about what are you doing and how do you arrive every day? Like one of them is, if you can't say hello in a good, in the morning in a happy way, that's on you, right? Like kind of what's going on here. Like you're just walking in the door. So I think those types of overarching themes really play into what our listeners are going through and what they've been through, going through, are still going through before, during, and after divorce, and new relationships. Are you going to bring your former spouse, invite them, and I'm saying in quotes, into the dinner that you're having when you're dating by bringing them up? Like you're just looking backwards, not forward.
So I remarried. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, or if I had. Yeah. I think I was just getting ready to get married.
It was just fresh. Yeah.
It was right before COVID. Like you said, I couldn't agree more. But bringing some of this up can be a touchy subject because, not that I want to invite my ex-wife.
Let's talk a little bit about that relationship though, because I think that's a relationship that a lot of people struggle with, is figuring out how to navigate the waters of not being an a-hole, divorcee. Right, the book you haven't written. What have you learned about yourself in navigating that particular relationship?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is don't text them back right away. I know that they are asking something, and I know you can't hear a tone or inflection through texts or emails, but for some reason I can hear her tone and inflection and how she's handling the situation. And it's tough because you're a business after you get a divorce. Especially if you have children. I mean, if you get a divorce, you don't have any children, you don't ever talk to each other again. But if you have children, and there's a business, and if a president of the company has a partner in a business and they don't see eye to eye, that company is just it's gonna go away. My yeses mean yes, and my no's mean no when it comes to my children or anything that I do in life. And that's opposite on that other side of the fence. It makes it hard for children to understand, because they go from one house to the other, and this person lets them do everything. And it's an age-old problem, right? I mean, I'm not the first guy.
This is nothing new.
Yeah,
this is nothing new. And you're describing things that don't have to be necessarily conflict. It could be, well, at mom's, I get to stay up till 10, but dad, why do I have to go to bed at 9:30? Right? It's not inherent whether a child should go to bed at 9:30, 10, or 9:45. It's a difference of opinion. Neither is right nor wrong. They're just different. But that child has to adjust to that. And inevitably, they only ask the question why at the person's house where they want more leniency. They're never going to go to you and say, Dad, at mom's, I go to bed at 9:30. Here I go to bed at 10. Why can't I go to bed at 9:30 here? That's never coming out of a child's mouth, right?
Dad, why aren't you harder on me right now?
Yeah, no, I'll give you an example, which I'm very surprised about. I have a 16-year-old son, a 20-year-old son, a 16-year-old son, and then I have a 17-year-old bonus son for my wife, Michelle. And he wanted to have his girlfriend over last night, and it was her sweet 16th birthday. And I said, okay, but can we agree on a few things? And we made an agreement and we planned and everything. So then come party time in the backyard, they all behave themselves, but then he's asking questions that he already knows the answer to. And then he wants to be mad at me. And he should be at a point already, at least in my house, to know that my yes is yes and my no means no. It can be very confusing for them and frustrating for both parents on either side of the spectrum.
It's a brilliant example because you even set it all up beforehand. Like, hey, you want to do this? Here's the rules. Are we agreeing on the rules? Repeat them back. Make sure I understand what you're saying. You repeat them back to me. You understand what I'm saying. And then halfway through, he wants to change the deal.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny. It gets to like that's actually not where I thought you were going to go, because I felt like my own kids would do a similar thing, but they would do it like they'd already know the answer is yes or no, but then they would ask the question again in front of their boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And that subtle way of like social manipulation. I feel like the book I need is How Not to Be an A-hole Parent and Lose Your Kids, right? Like that's the sort of rationale behind, or the sort of angle that feels like how to set that standard for yeses and nos, even though teenage kids are going to do that social manipulation, like it or not. Like it's going to happen. They might not even know they do it.
Pete, I got to pause here just for a minute because people can't see Brian. He's just jotted down like 15 of the 30 days on how not to be an asshole parent and lose your kid. And also how not to be an asshole kid and lose your parents. Yeah. And that should be how not to be an asshole kid and lose your free ride to college.
Yeah. Right.
So, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely take everything that I hear and I say and act and interact and take note.
Yeah, but I think to your point about that co-parenting, it is hard for the kids and for the parents when there's different rules. And this is the suggestion I give to everybody is kids get told no all the time. So one of my rules of being a parent was say yes as often as I could. If I can say yes, then say yes. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't come with grounds or boundaries that you can discuss. And then what I would also try to do, if I felt it was something that I feel like I could say yes to this, I don't know if my former spouse would, I would give the conditional yes, like, hey, I need to talk to your mom about this. Theoretically, I'm not opposed, but there could be some nuance there. The practicalities might not work. Let me talk to mom, make sure we're on the same page. And when you do that with kids, first off, they're amazed and can't believe that the parents actually talk. Now, it might be a text, it might be this, it might be that, but I think that's the gold standard in being able to do that because your kids then know like, they're actually talking. So maybe I can't get away with as much as I thought I could because they will play you against each other like no one's business.
Yeah, but what do you do? Like in this case, like where Brian was talking about where his former spouse is diametrically opposed to, like, it's just opposites. The answers are opposites to what he, like from your attorney's perspective, you're running a business with a co-parent who is essentially a frustrating non-participant.
The easy answer is you have to go by whatever the final judgment, the divorce decree, the parenting plan says. It will be void of 90% of these questions. It's not going to talk about whether or not you can have a girlfriend spend the night at 16. Okay. In the same room, not in the same room, on the couch, whatever the case may be. It's not going to talk about sleepovers. It's not going to talk about whether the kid can go on a weekend trip with friends when it's beach week for their seniors, right? So those are decisions that when the child's with you, you get to make. Now, is it better to say, hey, I don't have to talk to you about this under the plan. I can do whatever I want. Usually not the best way to start a conversation, but in essence, you could say something to the effect, but a little nicer. But I wanted to get your input.
It's true. Very true. Receiving each other's input on a business level will make everybody's lives a lot easier and less confusing. But, as a parent, the last thing you want to do is see your children hurt. When you're the main cause of their hurt, then some parents form guilt. Say a lot of them do. They handle it different ways. The way I handled it is I wanted to be the rock in their life by providing them a home, the same schools, food, fun. That was what I did consistently. And I find that there are people on the other side of the spectrum will be, for lack of a better term, the Disneyland mom or dad, where it's just fucking fun all the time. And it's, no, come on, mom. Okay. Look, if you're going through divorce and you are struggling with some of these things, I think therapy plays well if you're willing to go. And that's what these books have done for me. Not only that, therapy has done wonders. helping you look into oneself. But consistency is key. And if you can't do that, it's going to be chaos.
Well, how do you handle that? Because it feels like you, of all people, have likely run into a situation where you still look at your former spouse and you think, well, they're being an a-hole. Here we are, they're an a-hole. And I can either take the high road and I can do my best to communicate and know that I am doing my level best, or I can go down to their level and just be an a-hole too. Do you ever find yourself fighting that natural instinct to just get dirty? And how do you navigate through that?
Well, I found it's lazy to get dirty, and it's hard to go above and beyond what she would or he or she would expect of you. That's not what happens; it's how you react and respond to what happens, which I'm sure you guys have heard 1,000 times. And that's something that I've learned, that instead of just firing off a text, which I recommend if you're going to have a conversation with your ex, don't let it be on text. Just pick up the phone. I know neither one of you want to hear each other's voices or even talk, but it's a must, especially if you have kids.
And on that point, when I've dealt with that, Brian, people are like, well, how do I even start that? And I say, you start it with a text like, hey, I think, this is an important topic that I'm finding difficult to communicate through a text. Would you have some time to chat about it? What works for you, right? You start with your weakness, which I think is powerful. Hey, I think this is an important topic that I'm having trouble communicating with over text. You're trying to work out the problem. You're not trying to be an asshole, right? And you can take that to like what you said, Brian. Like, I know tone and context is difficult in text, but however granular you want to get, I think broad brushstrokes are a little bit better. In communication when you're trying to then have the granular conversation later. But you start with that and you give a request. Can we talk? What works for you? There's almost nothing negative in that can be taken negative from the reader, right? Now, you guys have a long history. Oh, she just wants to get on the phone with me. Oh, he just wants to get on the phone with me. Okay. He's going to start with this about the kids, and he's going to then talk about like, how I don't deserve the alimony. I'm going to go down that road. So if you send the invite or you respond to it, you could say, yes, I would love to talk to you, or yes, I can talk to you. Let's please only talk about this issue. And then there's another request. So look, man, when they have summits between superpowers, everybody knows the agenda on what they're going to talk about before you get there. And I think that's how you have to do it, because you guys are the two superpowers in your kid's life. And if you're going to nuke each other, it's not going to help your kid.
Not at all. And I've tried it both ways. And I would say the kinder way is the better way to go. Taking the higher road, keeping the business.
According to the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, about 10% of children live with a parent with an alcohol use disorder. Seth, that rubs you the wrong way. I know it.
Every week, Pete, it rubs me the wrong way. It's always an alarming statistic to me, even though I hear it all the time. So, what can we do about it? If we can't change people, they can only change if they choose to change themselves. What can the court system, what can Soberlink do for you in your divorce case?
That is exactly what we want to try and do, and what we're doing with our partner, Soberlink. Soberlink, what is it, Soberlink? Soberlink is like a breathalyzer. You've seen a breathalyzer, you've watched TV. This one's a little bit different, though. It has facial recognition camera built right into it so that you can hold it up to your face, you blow into it, it knows it's you, and in real time, it sends the data back to the people who need to know whether you are safe to drive. Now, Seth, who needs to know whether you're safe to drive? Why do we care?
It's simple. You're being accused of being an alcoholic. You're being accused of being a drunk. All these negative terms are going to come flying at you. And you're going to say, I don't need to prove anything. Well, ultimately, you don't have to prove anything to your spouse. You have to show the court, the judge who's making the decision on whether you get to see your child or not, whether or not you suffer from alcoholism. And if you do, whether you can hold it together long enough to spend quality time with your kids, not drive with them, not be intoxicated when you're with them. This eliminates the potential weaponization of alcoholism. It eliminates the he said, she said, because all you do is you blow into the Soberlink device when you have your kids. If you're picking them up, just had them, why you have them, and it shows you haven't been drinking, and it will eliminate with third-party, real-time, independent verification that you're sober and you're spending quality time with your kids. It's going to save you a lot of money in attorney's fees because you're not going to have to go to court and argue about it.
There you go. Seth uses it at the firm with his clients. Courts love it because the system keeps the focus on what is best in the best interests of the child. And you're going to love it. All you need to do to get started and receive $50 off of your device when you do get started is visit Soberlink.com/toaster. That's Soberlink.com/toaster. Thank you to Soberlink for sponsoring this show.
And you mentioned something earlier. You said, don't respond right away. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How long should you wait? What should you do in between? If they're blowing up your phone 15 times because you haven't responded.
Well, first, I don't encourage stonewalling your ex-wife when you have children or your ex-husband, because that's going to lead to greater problems. But what I mean by that is I can't go off of a knee-jerk reaction because I've, again, done it both ways. I've gone off knee-jerk and I've thoughtfully written what I was going to say back on my email and then copy-pasted into a text. So it could be thoughtful, thought out, and convey a message where you're not being a dick.
Yeah, I think that's the I think that's the really interesting one. But everything that we're talking about here, we recently did an episode on parallel parenting. The whole concept of like, you're two parents working alongside one another, but you don't aren't talking a whole lot between the two of you. It sort of feels like, I don't know, that maybe you're you've either sort of become that through kindness and ineffectual communication, or maybe if not even intentionally so. Have you explored that sort of in your head, like what it means to be a parallel parent in this business relationship between the two of you? And does that strike a chord?
Asked me that question maybe 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps, but now I know how to manage a relationship who is my business partner in a calm, cool, and collective way. I'm not perfect. There are still times where I'll accidentally be human, but I'll always wake up the next morning going, "Man, you could have handled that better," and you know it. Why are you going back to that asshole mode and saying things you don't mean and in a tone that's unacceptable?
Yeah.
Do you ever apologize when you do that? When you wake up that next morning and it was really bad, do you ever send the text saying, "Hey, I'm sorry"?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that is rare, Pete. So many people don't want to do the wrong thing. And then when they do, they try to cover it up or downplay it instead of just owning it. And I see that all the time. Well, if I say I'm sorry, it means I did something wrong. They're going to use that in court against me. And what I'm saying is the judge is human. The judge has kids. The judge gets in arguments with their spouse. But it's not like these aren't humans we're standing in front of in the courtroom. And they're going to see a parent who apologized. What's wrong with that? That's powerful.
Yeah, and beautiful, especially if you weren't willing to do that before. And now you are. And you've begun slowly to change yourself. I feel like I thought, one day I'll learn it all and fully change, understand everything. And I don't think that changing process is going to end until the day I stop breathing.
Well, speaking of growing, learning, changing, you're also a writer-director, and you just wrote and directed your first feature, The Mass Shooting Monologues. And I'm interested in your experience. The credits say, and I haven't seen the film, but the credits say it introduces your son. I'm curious how your relationship with your son has changed. You have 2 kids, how your relationship with your kids have changed, and now to the point that you're working with them.
I think it's a constant change depending on their season of their lives and my season of my life. Right now, he's in the season of life of, he just moved out. And he's ready to be on his own. And I'm in the season of my life where I'm like, "Please don't go. I miss you. I love you so much. Can you call me 40 times a day? Why don't you reply to my text?" I sound like my mother. Yeah. "Why don't you reply to my text right away? You've been 2 hours. Is everything okay? Are you all right?" So I would say that's how it changed. But, the mass shooting monologues, which I love that title. They changed it because we couldn't sell it. Now it's called The Last Day of the Rest of My Life.
Oh, okay.
But it's a series of monologues. So I wanted to just be my own boss and not have to worry about anybody else's money, which means you're not going to be able to work with a lot of money if you're going to want to do that. And we did. So I thought, how could we, find a way to make a movie on the more affordable end of things? So I took, there's a Broadway play called The Vagina Monologues, which is about a single subject talked about in 8 different stories. So that's what I did, and I mixed it in with pictures and B-roll. But the story is basically about a mass shooting at a high school as a result of being bullied, and my son played the mass shooter.
Wow.
Yeah, it was tough. I'm a Columbine High School graduate. I wasn't there when it happened, but I've seen a lot of the. I mean, gosh, it seems ages ago right now. Now it's 3-4 times a freaking week.
Right.
But I wanted to. I don't want to say that mass shooter is an anti-hero, but just watch the movie and tell me what you think. But I know that's not what we're talking about right now. But when you have an opportunity to check it out, it's on Amazon and wherever you can stream a movie.
Well, I sure will, and I think it's a great testament to just the way you navigated your post-divorce relationship with your kids, that you're now casting your son in your projects. That's a big thing.
It is, Pete. Brian, to where you are in your seasons of life and your child is, I talk to parents all the time about playing the long game, because in our lifetimes, if we're fortunate enough, our children's lives 0 to 18 is going to be a small segment of their life. We will be parents to our adult children longer than we're parents to our children as children. And if you play the long game, that's what I'm after. That's what I want my clients to have. In what you do during your divorce and post-divorce and how you co-parent and how you treat your children lays the foundation for the rest of their lives. And once you don't have the power of the checkbook and the credit card and the ATM and Zelle and Venmo, then you're going to know where your kids go.
Yeah, I think as the kids would say, after you said a sentence, they would go, facts.
Oh, man.
When they don't have nothing to say, they're like, group. Okay, anything else you want to say? No, Dad. Facts. Yeah. Yep. But, what you just said, obviously takes years of experience, but you carry wisdom and discernment of how you convey that. And that's how I try to model raising these boys for the long game. I'm sorry that you're mad at me that I'm not taking you to Europe this year. But we got other things to do. And we're gonna do it this way.
See, I almost said that same thing. I said, do you have any idea how many Europeans come to Tampa, Florida for vacation? So let's do this. Instead of going to Europe, let's pretend we're Europeans in Tampa.
Yeah. Go to a beach and speak with an accent.
That's right. Don't put on sunscreen and get burnt. There's a lot of fun things we can do.
Yeah, just go native. You're fine. Well, I'll tell you, Brian, this is awesome, and congratulations on the success of the series too. That it continues to blossom in these new ways, new pairs of books and observations and lessons learned.
I got to say one thing before we close here, Pete, is I got a little nervous because I knew Brian was recently married, but you started the show like last time we talked, you had 1 and now you have 6, and I thought, damn, that guy was busy having kids. And I was like so thankful. Brian was like, yeah, I've been writing a lot of books.
It's a lot of books. And directing movies. Yeah.
Couple movies in between.
You have to live with it forever.
They don't talk back though, do they? I don't know.
No, just their readers.
Just the readers. Well, and you could be one of those readers too, just to check out the hownottobeseries.com. That's a handy URL, How Not to Be series. We'll put links in the show notes. We'll also drop links into the Amazon version of the movie if you want to check out The Last Day of the Rest of My Life. Congratulations, Brian. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thanks, gentlemen.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We sure appreciate your time and attention. Don't forget, if you have a question, you can just visit howtosplitatoaster.com, and there's a button that says submit a question. You submit a question, it'll come right to me and Seth, and we'll answer it. Seth will answer it. I'll be color commentary, but Seth will answer it. Don't worry. And we would love to hear your questions. We've got questions that are stacking up. We're going to be talking about them in coming episodes. Thank you for those submissions. On behalf of Brian Ronalds and Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week right here on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.
Seth Nelson is an attorney with NLG Divorce and Family Law with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of NLG Divorce and Family Law. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.